Let's face it, dealing with healthcare programs is like going to the dentist for a root canal. There's nothing I'd rather not have to deal with than insurance. But it's a must-have. What options do we have today in this out-of-control healthcare industry? Today we're going to hear from an insider that has good news for you, so stay tuned. How do I bring my faith to work? How do I tap into the power of God in my work-life call? Why am I going through this adversity? Is God mad at me? I'm Oz Hellman, and I've been helping leaders like you answer these questions and more for over 30 years. That's what this podcast is all about. Let's learn and grow together. Welcome to TGIF, Today God is First. Well, welcome to our podcast this week. It's so great to have my friend Dennis Kelly with me, and I've known Dennis for many years, and he's actually on our board. And I've been wanting to do this podcast for many years, and we're just now getting around to it. So with this virus going around and more time at home, it makes sense for us to do it. So Dennis, it's good to have you on the podcast finally after so many years.
Yeah, it's great to be here. I think it was, I met you long before 2006, but I remember it was 2006, the day that we met in Washington, D.C. at an International Christian Chamber of Commerce meeting.
Yeah. And you were in a transition yourself. I believe you were in your Joseph Pitt, weren't you?
I was just entering the Joseph Pitt, had no idea what it was. So, and you woke me up that day, and it's been a different life ever since.
Yeah, well, I've watched how God has worked in your situation and continues to use you, and you're the ultimate networker. And but your background is insurance. You've been in that industry for a long time, and God's given you a niche to really serve businesses in that. It's an incredible service that you provide. But before we get into the nuts and bolts of actually what you do, give us a little bit of history of yourself and your background, how you got into what you're doing today.
Yeah, so I'm the oldest of 10 children, Irish Lebanese. So my friends tell me I have the carpetbagger part of me. Pretty much been a Christian all my life. Grew up Catholic. After married a Lutheran girl that's now my wife of 40 years. We have 2 children. Graduated college in '78 as a mechanical engineer, and went to work for the Nuclear Navy under Admiral Rickover. And that was in 1978. And after a year in the nuclear industry, we had the famous 3 Mile Island nuclear accident. And a year later, I found myself designing the tools to literally take apart the damaged nuclear core. And that was an exciting time as a 22, 23-year-old kid. I still have the books of some of the things that I did and the disruption I caused in that industry. But one day, my son was born in '84, deaf, and I was traveling around a lot, and I just felt like I can't keep traveling and learn how to raise a deaf son. And so my wife was in the insurance business, and so I went to her boss one day, and I said, "What do you have to do to sell insurance? Anybody can do that, right? I want to just get some sales experience." And I thought I was going to the insurance industry just to get some sales experience. And this is one of those clear things when you can say God's provision or God's provisions for you are so much easier to see in hindsight.
Sure.
I can watch how God's hand's been with us. 2000, so I had a agency, technology company. We were at the cutting edge of the health savings account era. I was selling high deductibles and what looked like health savings accounts back in 1988, even before medical savings accounts were passed in Congress. And for me at that time, it was just a solution to the managed care and the HMOs. You know, they just weren't legitimate insurance contracts. And so I was just trying to fix the problem of managed care in those days. And in '96, I found myself on Capitol Hill with Steve Forbes and advocating for the first bill for medical savings accounts, which was in 1997. Fast forward to 2006, we had a company that grew pretty fast under the high deductible health cares. And then we got crushed by a Fortune 10 company. They made a mistake in their systems and processing, and I didn't even think of this thing could happen in those days, but they turned the whole thing on us, crushed our company, crushed my reputation. For the year and a half that was going on, I was getting Oz's daily emails, and it was amazing. I didn't understand it at the time, but so many times I'd call my staff into the conference room, we'd read the daily devotional, and it was, I mean, there were 3 or 4 times in that year and a half when it was right this exact same day, one instance I can remember is we were going to court that day for an injunction hearing. And Oz's email said, trust the judges. And you can imagine, I mean, this is the last thing I wanted to do at that time. I couldn't even understand why I was in this situation. We didn't do anything wrong. It was, system error on this big insurance company's part, and we didn't have anything to do with it yet. All these false accusations and stuff. So it was so neat. I invited my whole staff. We had about 15 or 20 employees at the time. They all came to the courthouse. We all just witnessed what was going on. And like I say, we sat out in front of the courtroom that morning and read again Oz's email from the day that said, trust the judges. There was another time I was sitting with a government fiduciary, and it was about 5 o'clock in the evening. My secretary was outside, and we were having what she could hear was a little bit of a debate. And he was telling me I had to get a lawyer. And I said, I didn't need a lawyer. There's nothing going on here. I'm perfectly comfortable. I said, if you take care of my policyholders, my clients, and my employees that are clients, I'm going to be fine. I'm going to help you do your job, because I just need to protect those people, and I'll be protected. And he looked at me, he says, no, you have to get a lawyer. You don't understand what I'm saying. I said, I understand exactly what you're saying. If you just take care of my policyholders and my employees that are policyholders, I'm going to be fine. And he looks at me again, Dennis, you don't understand what I'm saying. And I said, well, I'm not sure I should say this right now in this setting, but I can tell you that I read the Bible a lot. And in the Bible, it tells me one day I'll be falsely accused. And in that time I'm falsely accused, I will, God will give me the words. And all I can say right now is these are the only words that he gave me. And I remember in hindsight now, this fiduciary, he jumped back and he says, oh, I know exactly. He started talking fast. I know exactly what you're talking about. If I'm ever on a desert island, I will be able to know where my God is. And I knew in that moment, I wasn't as mature Christian as I am today. I knew in that moment that he didn't have a deep faith. But I knew to just shut down the conversation. I said, look, let's go to dinner now. Let's see what's going on. And we'll come back tomorrow and see what we have to do. And that next morning, Oz's email was about, sheeps and doves and being falsely accused. It was literally the next morning. And I printed out 2 copies. I went into the fiduciary's office. By that time, I'd given him an office. And I said, look, I'm not sure about last night's conversation, but I'm even more sure I probably shouldn't be sitting here with these 2 sheets of paper. But I can tell you that in my life, God has a way of winking at us when we're doing the right thing. And those words I used last night, they're actually in this email that came out this morning. And in those days, I wouldn't have been able to find the verse in the Bible. I just knew the words. And Oz, there was the words right there with the scripture reference. And I said to him, I said, look, I know that you can probably assume 1 or 2 things. I stayed up all night to type this thing up to justify what I said to you last night. Or 2, this email goes to about 180,000 people every day. I know who the author is. We can get a hold of it. If you think I had anything to do with this email coming out this morning, please tell me so we can call the guy ourselves. But, we're on the right track. Let's keep going what we're doing. The guy left my office that day and never came back. He undermined everything we were doing. And he sent an email to my office manager about me trying to fight the system. And he basically said, I'll be praying for you, was the last lines that he put in the email. And it was my lawyer that picked out the fact that he spelled praying, P-R-E-Y. I-N-G. So anyway, I don't want to keep going on, but suffice it to say, when I met the ICCC in 2006 and Oz, it was definitely a divine appointment. I couldn't absorb the stuff that I was learning about being a king and a priest and, being an influence in the marketplace. I mean, God's just blessed me with witty inventions. I own a couple of companies. I've restarted a couple of companies since 2006. We're at right now with the crisis going on and the economy dropping down. Everybody's going to need to save money on health insurance, and everybody in the country right now is overspending by more than 30%. Our software allows us to go in and find $1,000 to $3,000 per employee per year of excess spending, and we can bring that money out of the system without changing your broker and without changing your insurance company. Well, I guess later on maybe we'll get some questions about why that is. But
yeah, Dennis, tell us a little bit about with the level of expertise you've had in the insurance industry. You've seen the good, bad, and the ugly. You've seen Obamacare. You've seen all that's come across in the last 10 years. Give us a snapshot of what you think where we are with insurance today. And when we talk insurance, we're primarily talking about health insurance but I mean, you've dabbled in all of it, but primarily in health insurance for companies. So Give us a snapshot of where you see us today.
So let me start by saying, once an engineer, always an engineer. So you never looked at things the same way everybody else did. And so, but it's changed dramatically. In my last 35 years, there was a time when an insurance contract was a contract, and you couldn't change a contract without getting permission from the two sides. In other words, if I bought a plan that had certain doctors in it, you couldn't take that doctor away from me without changing the contract at the end of the year. So insurance companies would wait till the end of the year, and the buyer and the seller would negotiate to make changes in the contract that would affect the pricing. Probably about 20 years ago, insurance companies started taking liberties by swapping out networks, canceling doctors, moving hospitals in and out of the system. So all of a sudden, you don't even know the policy by the beginning of the year is going to cover the same doctors that you were using last year. And so the government and the regulatory systems allowed insurance companies to, quote, play with the networks. That's probably 20 years. That's been going on for at least 15 or 20 years. And then when the Affordable Care Act, let me be professional and call it the Affordable Care Act, when it was passed in 2010, there were three promises: keep your doctor, keep your plan, and it's going to cost less. Well, not one of those promises were held in the Affordable Care Act. Nobody has the rights to their doctors anymore. I mean, it's almost like they're not even connected to the contracts. The plans were totally redesigned for the benefit of, I believe, the reason they standardized the plans on the Affordable Care Act was it was really about eventually having a single payer system be a solution to the problem. And that could be right around the corner for us right now. But by standardizing plans, taking away people's flexibility, it gave big institutional systems the ability to get rid of the smaller competition. Hundreds of companies were taken out, in the era of the first, 5 years of the Affordable Care Act. And God knows the price of insurance is at least double or triple what it was in 2010 for some people. So now in the last 5 years, there's been some improvements. The current administration has definitely done some executive orders that give some people some flexibility now, and getting some of the elimination of the mandate brings it more to a free market system. Small employers can now come together in associations. So these things are happening. Right now, I'm on a committee with a group called the Christian Employers Alliance or Association, CEA. It's a group of Christian employers that grew out of the Hobby Lobby case. The organization is funded by Hobby Lobby, Electric Beer, and a couple other, very committed Christian businessmen. And we're in the process of pulling together a captive insurance company. So this group will own their own insurance company and have their own conscience-based policy features. And so it'll eliminate, some of the restrictions that we have in the insurance industry. And I think there'll be more of these cooperatives and these captive insurance companies will be created in the future, just because there's not enough competition. And I think the last thing about right now, in the last 5 years, insurance companies have really started to mislabel, reports. In the old days, when an insurance company gave you a report that says your paid claims were $200,000, that meant they sent $200,000 of checks to doctors or hospitals or prescriptions on your behalf. Today, insurance companies include all kinds of other things, checks they're going to send in the future, claims that haven't come in yet. So when they report we paid $200,000, it could be as little as 100 or even 90,000 or 80,000 that they actually sent out in checks. The rest are in reserve accounts and contingency accounts, and that money's hidden by the insurance companies right now. In the last 6 months, we've really identified one of the key issues in the insurance industry is most buyers think that their insurance broker is their broker and representing them. The reality, I got a group of business guys together and brokers, and we prayed about this, say, what is going on? This is crazy. What we realized was the broker really has two clients. There's only about 6 or 8 insurance companies in the market today, and that broker represents those 6 or 8 insurance companies. And make no mistake about it, those insurance companies are their clients. An average broker might have 4 or 5 insurance companies they work with. They have several hundred clients. Those individual clients, they're their clients, but the loyalty and the control of the contracts goes back to the insurance company. And so we realized in this prayer group that a broker has a conflict of interest. They don't even know it sometimes, but the one client is lying to the other client or misinforming the other client. And And they can plausibly say, well, I don't know that. How do you know your rates are right? Well, today we have 2 and 3 years of data that proves the tactics and shows some of the methods they use for misinforming policyholders to what's going on in their policy. And we're now just getting a new wisdom about teaching brokers, because our clients are brokers, they're employers, they're insurance companies, they're administrators of insurance plans, they're associations. Our company is really about creating a different dialogue and bringing people onto the same table. So everybody's sitting around a table discussing what's going on and what's best for everybody. So I don't know if that was a kind of a long-winded answer. Maybe you could focus me in a little bit more on it.
Yeah. Well, what do you think needs to happen today?
So I think that there needs to be more transparency in the actual transactions between the insurance company and the doctors. There's basically too much control on the doctor, business and the pricing and things like that the insurance company keeps in the dark. And it is impacting the patient-doctor relationship. So as people on the buying side, if we take new strategies when we're buying our insurance and our healthcare, we can have our own strategies to basically understand there's a difference between healthcare and health insurance. And by using things like high deductible plans and sharing the risk with insurance companies, we can let health insurance only kick in when we really need it, when we're really sick, when we have a catastrophic illness. And for those years, we can budget our health care. Most people are spending somewhere $15,000, $20,000, $25,000 a year for health insurance. That's because they have both things bundled together. If you unbundle health care from health insurance, instead of spending $15,000 a year in health insurance premium, you might only spend $6,000 a year in health insurance premium, and then you take the savings and actually spend the $1,000 or $2,000 or $3,000 a year that you have to maintain your doctor relationship, have your health club, pay your health club dues, have a good exercise program, have a vibrant primary care physician in your life. So if you look at healthcare and break healthcare down into 3 different categories, the insurance need for those 3 categories are very different. Everybody will benefit if they have health insurance for life-altering illnesses. Life-altering illnesses are those illnesses that the day we're diagnosed, we're going to have that disease or that illness for the rest of our lives. Chances are our mortality has changed. We're not going to live as long as we thought we were going to live before we were diagnosed. And in some cases, there's illnesses that don't have a cure. And in those instances, unfortunately, there's professionals that take advantage of someone's fear of dying, and they do all kinds of experimental stuff, and claims can get up into the hundreds, thousands, even billions of dollars if the family will let them, if they have an insurance company that will keep paying the bill. So life-altering illnesses, we always need some kind of financial protection. Otherwise, we would have to go by whatever rules of the state insurance plan that we're in or whatever there. Major illnesses I define as any 12-month period that you're in the healthcare system and it's more than $2,000 or $3,000, and there's a known cure for your illness. So every one of us are going to have situations in our life, and usually in the last year of our life, where we're going to have a major illness. We might spend $50,000, we might spend $100,000, but the cure is predictable, and once we're cured, we're right back to normal. And so most people need health insurance to cover those major illnesses also. But then the third category I call routine care and maintenance. And the difference between my definition or our definition at Incenta and the normal definition, insurance companies want you to define routine care and maintenance as you can see your primary care physician once a year and it's paid at 100%. You can get a mammogram, or you can get a prostate, exam, or you can get a colon exam, once every 5 years, and we'll pay 100%. And that's a gimmick. I mean, that's really just a manipulation of the system. Those things, they've negotiated the prices down to hundreds of dollars, so they're not really giving you anything, but they're definitely shifting your mindset. Mm. I would encourage you to define routine care and maintenance as any 12-month period where you spent less than $2,500 in a year. If you spend less than $2,500 in a year for healthcare, you had control of who you saw, when you saw them. If you're a hypochondriac, you pay for it. If your children, every time they get a sniffle, you run to the doctor's office. Your routine care and maintenance costs will be a little bit higher than the next guy, However, they're not going to be out of control, and most people can budget it. And you're much better having control of that budget and budgeting yourself than turning it over to an insurance company and following their system every time you have a sniffle, every time you have a little claim. So I think that's probably one of the biggest things that I've done in the last 30 years is I've always had a difference between health insurance and health care. And so the strategies that we've evolved over the last 30 years are really encouraging people, manage your health care yourself. Have a primary care relationship in your life that's holding your records, that's seeing you on a regular basis. You don't save money by not going to the doctor. And then buy as little health insurance as you need to, but make sure you buy a good contract from a good company so that when you do have those large incidents, you're not having the insurance company tell you where you have to go, what you have to see.
So Dennis, over the last, I don't know how many years it is now, but there's a new form of insurance that's cropped up called membership organizations like Samaritan Ministries and MediShare.
Yep.
Give us a little summary on the good and the bad of those programs.
Great question. So a good friend of ours is a leader in that industry, and we've known him. I've known him for at least 10 years. About 5 years ago, I woke up in the morning and I felt like I heard God tell me, look, Dennis, you need to go and invest and figure out what's going on in that health sharing community. You can't just keep telling people you don't know. You can't tell people you don't trust it. You can't tell people it's, not good catastrophic care. And so I went to this friend of ours, Oz, and I asked him, I said, look, I would like to, I feel like I'm supposed to, at that time, there was 600,000 policyholders or members in the health sharing community nationwide. And I went to this leader and I said, look, I'm in the insurance world, you're in the sharing world. I can't keep telling people I don't know. If you will let me walk with you and learn a little bit about your industry, I'll be willing to share the insurance and see if there's a way these two things should be, put together as an elegant way to take the best of both worlds and put them together. And so we made a covenant between the two of us. I gave him some free consulting and he gave me some, referrals and stuff like that. It was a blessed relationship. What I can say to you today is the health sharing community right now has 109 different communities. They're primarily Christian communities. The bad is several of them or some of them are, unfortunately for the kingdom, are stealing in the name of the Lord. And it breaks my heart. Today, I'm a subject matter expert for a law firm. We have 4 or 5 of these firms as clients, and we have 4 or 5 that we're just watching that we know that what they're doing is not right, but we don't know what to do about it. So certainly not Samaritans and some of the other gold standard communities. But I regularly recommend to single families and people that are self-employed that are on a lower income. If you're a Christian and you have a faith, it is a good alternative for you. And again, I'd be more than happy to share in a private way, which ones, I would lean towards and which ones I lean away from.
Well, I know that my personal experiences before I became eligible for Medicare, in retirement, I was using Samaritan Ministries. And now my wife has an account for Samaritan Ministries. And our personal experience has been good with them. They've been good at reimbursing. And we didn't really clarify how that thing works, but basically you become a member of this group and the members share their medical bills with each other, and you submit your bill and it gets paid by another member by sending a check to you. And the cost of it is probably, at least 60 to 70% lower than a typical insurance program. And so we've been very happy with it. And so that's the way it works.
Yeah, and I think that so the only caution I add is it is a membership organization. Some of them are relying on the fact that if you get really, really, really sick, you will go back into the public insurance market and get traditional insurance. Some of them have some pretty stiff restrictions on prescriptions and certain types of coverages, chronic illnesses. Mm-hmm. And so that's the biggest negative, I think, today is, in the insurance industry, that's called adverse selection or cherry picking. Mm-hmm. So if I'm only getting healthy members, then there's a lot of extra money in the in the community that's not needed. And if when someone in the community gets really sick, they just opt out and go back into the insurance pool. It's not, that's not economically sound, but that is one of the things that are going on in these communities. Not to mention the fact that, again, there are a couple of these communities that have embezzled or moved millions and millions of dollars. So do your research. Like I say, I'm very much in favor of the sharing communities. There is a way to have an elegant solution between sharing and insurance. Some catastrophic insurance policies might make sense that are much less expensive, and couple that with your sharing on your own. Regulations don't allow the sharing communities to sell insurance at the same time. So it's something that you have to do as a consumer or as a small employer. We've had several small Christian employers in the past that have offered both sharing to their members and traditional insurance. And so it can go on an annual basis, and they can, watch both communities at the same time.
So the health sharing model is not formally classified as insurance, right? It's
correct. It's specifically not insurance, and there is no risk. There's no pooling of claims. So the premise is the ecclesia of the community will come up with the money to cover the community's needs. And some of the sharing communities do an excellent job. They've great record keeping. They got reserves built up. It's transparent. They've never missed a payment. They have very few restrictions on the catastrophic things. So, they're just playing the game much fairer than some of the other groups that just are. And there are some groups that have very thin faith statements. They found a little church community that they can build into a health sharing community, but it's a commercial operation, and there's people making a lot of money. And so I just say, if you think you want to be in one of those communities, we are advocating right now. The law firm that I'm part of this law firm was part of putting together the ECFA. And if any of you are familiar with the nonprofit world, this group called the Economics Council something. ECFA is like the blue ribbon for nonprofits in terms of where your money's going. How much of the money that I give to this ministry ends up in ministry? And they do best practices and things like that. So there's standards that people can look to as an industry. We need that kind of standard right now in the health sharing community. But some of the players don't want the standard because they know it will reflect negatively on them, and they're some of the bigger players. So, but if you think of what's coming in the future, one or two things will happen. The sharing community will be shut down by government just because there'll be a revenue source and there'll be penalties and corruption and things like that. It could shut down the whole medical sharing community regulatorily because it's there by regulatory exception now. So it could be shut down. Second thing is, if we could get this standards community, we'll be able to separate the good from the bad in sort of a public record.
Yeah. So earlier you used the word disruptive. And I think of that when I think of the kind of business that you have now that basically is an advocate for the businesses where you go in and evaluate their insurance program. And because you know how insurance works, you're able to look under the hood, if you will, to see where people are spending too much money. And you basically find places where they can save money. Did I describe that correctly?
Yeah, no, I think that's right. What you find is when you can put the employer and the employees on the same side of the table in a dialogue that says, hey, this is our money we're spending. It's not Blue Cross's money. It's not United Healthcare's money. We gave them the money. So when you can bring the big consumer, which is the employer, and the little consumer, when they can partner together as to how the money goes in and how it's being spent, there could be a different, so the name incentive comes from the science of incentives. And so when I align the incentives between the big consumer and the little consumer, they both buy less insurance. Unfortunately, today, many brokers, they're worried about the sale between the big consumer and the insurance company, and they're leaving the employee out of the equation. And that's probably the biggest thing that we've been a disruptive for now going on 30 years. By putting the employer and the employer on this side of the table, put the insurance company and providers on the other side of the table, now I can have more control of my budget.
So what's a typical size company that you work with, or is there a minimum size that it makes sense for a company to have you come in and look at what they're doing?
So most of the people that will see this broadcast are in the Christian community. And there's no size in the Christian community that we won't give advice to. So if you're under 25 employees, the smaller you are, the bigger the savings is per capita when you learn some of these things. So, and like I say, depending on where you are, in what region of the country, I mean, if you're under 25 employees, we're probably in a situation where we're just going to be giving you advice and helping you to fix your own situation locally. If you're in the Mid-Atlantic, if you're in Texas, if you're in the Southeast, we have representatives throughout those parts of the country. We know those plans pretty well. So we can pretty much help anybody, in that size company and potentially even have somebody locally that they would deal with.
And how does
generally the companies that get the biggest bang for the buck for what we do are those companies that are somewhere around 35 employees up to 500. There's a couple of strata within there, whether you have a competent HR person or whether HR and finance are always fighting every year. So there's different dynamics that happen in that range. But generally, that size company doesn't have the expertise and the data that we have. And so we couple our data with their experience and what they're actually doing. There's, like I say, it's $1,000 to $3,000 per employee per year. And it's not unusual for it to be $4,000 or $5,000.
So how does your company earn money from that service?
Yeah, so we have a 7-step process. And when we go in, let's just take the simple example. An employer calls us up, we're working directly for the employer. In our 7-step process, we're going to do the first analysis at no cost to the employer. We will, once we do that analysis, we write up a report and we bring it to the employer. And this report projects the savings and shows them roughly where the savings are coming from, what things that they're not doing that they could be doing, some things they're asking their insurance company, their broker to do that they should be asking different questions. At that point, they would engage us in a contingent contract. Basically, our contract would guarantee a minimum savings level. If we don't hit that minimum savings level, we don't get paid anything. And there's usually 3 tiers of compensation. So if we hit the first level, we get paid X. If we hit the second level, we get paid Y. If we hit the third level, we get paid Z. The payments and the strategy is 100% in the employer's control. So if we give them a strategy that's going to save them $200,000, but in their judgment, their employees wouldn't like that, or they don't want to do that with their employees, they don't save the 200. It doesn't mean the 200 goes away. It's just there for a future time when they learn more about their plan. But it's their choice to implement strategies, and we only get paid on the strategies that they implement. And then most employers, or at least half of our clients, there's some ongoing technology that we buy. It's kind of like software as a service and advocacy as a service. Once they see the benefit of having a person like a company like us analyzing the data every month, every quarter, giving them a 2 or 3 year strategy, most of our clients that have the analysis done and hire us to do the savings will then hire us a software as a service, and they'll pay us a small per employee per month fee to maintain their system, continue a continuity in the communication, and give them sort of a rolling 24-month what's going on in the future. Yeah. Most of our clients save money the first 3 years they're with us because they never implement every strategy that we find for them in the first year. As they collect data and they learn more about their employees and their insurance company and their broker, they implement the second, third strategies in the second year and more strategies in the third year. So generally, we might identify, let's say we identify $1 million of savings. They may only implement 500,000 or 600,000 of that in the first year, and the second 400,000 just not sure about, and they're happy having a $600,000 savings for that year. And then they implement 1 or 2 of the strategies the next year.
Yeah. Well, I hope that this session has been helpful for you. And, I just want to be very transparent here that, the whole purpose of this session was to really give information and educate our friends out there. And it just so happens that Dennis also has a great company that can help people if you need it, that has very little risk if you in hiring. So this is not a infomercial. It's really an information service to them. But Dennis is on my board, and he's a Kingdom guy. And if I'm going to have a question about insurance or looking at my stuff, I'm going to have Dennis do it. So Dennis, why don't you give out your contact information, your website, and if people
Sure.
want to get in touch with you, how they do it?
Yeah, and I can't understate what Oz said. I get to spend about 30% of my time breaking down the silos in the Christian marketplace. It doesn't matter if it's Pinnacle Forum, C12, Convene. We need to come together in unity, really, for such a time as this. So I would look forward to talking to anybody that would be interested or have questions about saving money on healthcare, any aspect of insurance. As I said, I'm a subject matter expert in all of insurance. My website is incenta.net, INCENTA.net. And the office phone number here is 240-345-3345. My email address, dennis.kelly@incenta.net. And again,
Is
Incenta
that
comes from the
Kelly?
Kelly, yes.
Say that again, at Incenta.
At Incenta, INCENTA.net.
Okay. One last thing I want to talk with you about. You are part of the Change Agent Master Mentor program, and I want you to speak to that area and why that's an important program for marketplace leaders to be a part of, and what you have gained through the teaching and training over the years for yourself.
Yeah, I think so. For me, the Change Agent Network represents what I call a muster point. And I've been trying to really just get this idea of muster points out into the community. So in scripture, it tells shaking is a promise, not a problem. So we are going to learn through adversity. We're going to learn through those times we come under pressure. And what Oz has created and what the Change Agent Network represents is what I call just-in-time learning. Okay. And Oz probably has the most extensive content when it comes to understanding how to walk in the marketplace, be salt and light, collaborate with other Christians at that level, bringing heaven down to earth in a very deliberate way. Yeah, so the Change Agent Network really represents just-in-time education and training for marketplace believers. A muster point, I use the term muster point because if you ever taken a cruise on a cruise ship, the first thing that happens once you push the boat off of the dock is they have you grab your life gear and go to a point on the boat that's designed for the people so they can keep track of you. If there's an emergency, you go to this muster point, and that's where you get instructions for are we abandoning the ship, or we just as a minor thing. And so I believe God allows us to come together in places like the Change Agent Network and create relationships that come together at time of shaking. And whether it's a personal shaking in your own personal life, whether it's shaking in your company, or whether it's shaking in your region, or like in times like this, we have shaking in the whole world is shaking over this virus. And there's a part of me that believes that there's people in the world taking advantage of this situation and exaggerating it. And a lot of sheep are going to go to slaughter. So this is for such a time as this that we're supposed to be coming together in forums like this and relationships like this that have stood the test of time. Gunnar Olson, a friend of Oz and I mean, he at one point he said the Christian community, business community, could benefit from having a triple-E rating, something that would be behind the scenes, so we could say, is this guy excellent? Is he ethical? Does he have good experience? And I think you get that kind of input and that kind of transparency and support when you're part of that Change Agent Network, as well as some of the other Christian business communities like Convene, C12, Pinnacle Forum. Everybody's trying to do their own thing, but I'm afraid today we have a few too many silos, and we need to find ways to break down some of the silos. And as my friend Chuck Colson told me, there's two kinds of people in the world, believers and non-believers. For believers, iron sharpens iron. That's what happens at the Change Agent Network. For non-believers, we're called to love them and serve them. And one day they might even ask you, hey, why do you do this? And that is the biggest blessing you can have from someone just walking alongside when they look at you one day and say, why are you doing this?
Well, that's good, Dennis. Appreciate you sharing all the wisdom about your industry, and hopefully you guys out there that one of the ways you save money is not spending it. and,
Right,
and if you
exactly.
can find where you're spending money that you don't need to spend it, Dennis might be a good solution for those of you who are
Exactly.
business owners. And
And we don't charge you for the service up front.
yeah, how many services help you find money and don't charge you for it until you find it?
Exactly.
So, I wish every business did that, right?
Exactly.
Well,
Well, that's
let
why.
me close our time in prayer and thank everybody for being on, and thank you, Dennis, for sharing your wisdom with us. Father, we thank you for those who have been on today, and we do pray for those who are going through this crisis in our nation, and we do lift up each one that's out of work, each business that's suffering. We pray that, Father, you be their source, you be Jehovah Jireh for them. We thank you, Father, for just your Holy Spirit that guides us and helps us see what we have in our hand that we can use to get us through this season, to provide manna for each of us. And we thank you and give you glory in Jesus' name. Amen. All
Amen.
right, Dennis, perfect timing.
Thanks, Oz.
All
Bye bye.
right, take care. Bye bye.